Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. There was a man there named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. He tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd, so he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. When Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. "Zacchaeus," he said, "quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today." Zacchaeus quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But the people were displeased. "He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner," they grumbled. Meanwhile, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and said, "I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much." Jesus responded, "Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost."
Hello everyone, and welcome back. We're so glad that you're here with us today. I have just a couple things I want you to know about, things that are really important coming up. And we are in our series right now, The Ties That Bind, and as an exercise of unity, as things kind of start to get rolling again in our church, we want everyone involved in a connect group. And we are all going to be studying the same thing. It's a study called Starting Well. And it's meant to help us have really healthy small groups. Because it's not just that we want people in groups. We want to have healthy groups where people really get to know each other and build strong relationships. And so as the weeks go on, we're going to show you ways to become involved. Some of you had a connect group before COVID. Some of you don't have one yet. But we want everyone to be involved in this study. Some will be online, some will be in person. Either way, we want you involved, so be thinking about that. That starts in April. Also, at the end of this month, February 27th, we are going to be having a town hall meeting right after the service. And in that meeting are going to be some important announcements that are going to be made. Good stuff, and exciting stuff, but they will be made live at that meeting. So I would ask you to put that on your calendar for February 27th. Okay. That's it for the announcements. Let's get into this message here for today. And I'm going to start with a question. How do you determine a person's worth? It seems like a strange question for today because we all have the knee-jerk automatic response, which is everyone's worth the same, right? Well, that would be a very new thing because certainly in ancient times, people were not considered to be worth the same. For example, if you were a foreigner, you were worth a lot less. If you were unintelligent, worth even less. If you were weak, sick, a woman, a child, worth less. In Greece, Aristotle taught that the only worth you had was how rational or how logical you could be. And if you couldn't be rational or logical, then you basically had the worth of a slave. You should be a slave. That's right. And even, get this, Jesus himself was valued at 30 pieces of silver. The Son of God, that was his value. And you'd say, well, we've evolved in 2022. You know, we've got our human rights, our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. There's laws that say we are all worth the same. But watch a disaster movie and you find out that that's not true. Now, for those of you who don't know what a disaster movie is, this is a movie about the end of the world where it's going to collapse and humanity's on the brink of disappearing. And before the world ends and they all go into a bunker or they head off into space to some other planet, they pick the people who are the most valuable. That's right. And the people who are the most valuable are the scientists, the politicians, engineers, doctors. These are clearly the most valuable. Do you know who's never included in those lists? Pastors. That's right. No one cares. Pastors are all going to be standing on planet Earth as everything around them explodes and waving goodbye to that spaceship as they head off to a new beginning somewhere else. That's right. But to be fair, I don't think there'd be a lot of people from the Nanaimo Alliance Church making that cut. I think most of us would probably be waving goodbye to the ones who are valued the most. And we are talking about the value of people today in the ties that bind. And we've already talked about how the truth about God binds us together. We've talked about how the truth about ourselves, our own sinfulness, binds us together. And now we're going to look at the truth about others and how that binds us together. And in order to do that, we are going to be looking at a famous story. I love this story. I talked about this story not that long ago, but it's worth taking another look at. From Luke 19. It starts like this. Jesus entered Jericho and made his way through the town. Now, Jericho, by the way, is a city with money. And if the name sounds familiar, that's right. You heard of this city already when Joshua and the gang marched around this city a few times and the walls crumbled and all that sort of thing. Well, there's been significant renovations since then. This was now a city of palm trees, a city known for its rose gardens and its sycamore tree-lined streets. This city was so pretty that Mark Antony gave it to Cleopatra as a sign of affection. It must have been pretty nice, I'd say, if you're going to give this as a sign of affection to Cleopatra. Can you imagine a time in the world where it was really like a giant game of Risk? You know, I'll give you this for that, and I'll, just hand a city over to you. Man, amazing. Anyway, let's continue. There was a man named Zacchaeus. He was the chief tax collector in the region, and he had become very rich. Now, you might not know this, but there's a difficulty in that sentence as to how to translate that word, chief tax collector, because it's only used there in the New Testament. In the entire New Testament, that word is only used there. And so it's hard to determine what that means. And while politically or economically, we don't know exactly what it means, what everyone agrees on is that Zach was a big deal. He was no pencil-pushing, cubicle-occupying bureaucrat. He was more like a regional manager with the corner executive office and the great view. Now, you probably are aware of the fact that tax collectors even today are not that popular. Tax collectors today would probably tell you they just work for the government. But in those days, tax collectors were hated and despised, both by the occupying government and by the occupied people, because both of them saw tax collectors as traitors. Imagine for a moment, let's say Vancouver Island gets invaded by Mongolia. Mongolia invades Vancouver Island. They take it over. And your next door neighbor decides he's going to work for the Mongolians, taking your money to pay the Mongolian government. And he can set the rates at whatever he wants, and you have to pay. Now, how popular would that neighbor be? Now you're getting an idea of what Zacchaeus was viewed as in Jericho. So, why would you want to become a tax collector? Why be so unpopular with your friends, your family, your whole community hates you? Why would you want to be a tax collector? One answer, and you already know it: money. This was a great way to become rich, and that's exactly what we find is the description of Zach. He is wealthy. Now, it says he tried to get a look at Jesus, but he was too short to see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree beside the road, for Jesus was going to pass that way. Zach was curious, and all he wanted to do was get a look. And I would imagine that the people along the road, they saw Zach coming and said, we're not going to let this guy in. And they might, kind of crowd in and make sure that he can't get past them. So he gets desperate and he goes ahead of the crowd to a tree and he climbs it. Well, when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zach and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Now notice something here. Who's extending the invitation? Jesus is. Zach had no intention of speaking to Jesus, certainly not to invite him to his house. Jesus invited himself over, and try that after church sometimes. Hey, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you the privilege of feeding me. That's right, I'm going to give you the privilege of feeding me. Now, the crowd was upset about this, but they weren't upset about the fact that Jesus just invited himself over for lunch. No, that wasn't the problem. We continue on. It says, Zacchaeus quickly climbed down. Now watch how he reacts to this whole scenario. Quickly climbed down and took Jesus to his house in great excitement and joy. But not everyone was excited. But the people were displeased. He has gone to be the guest of a notorious sinner, they grumbled. Oh, Jesus did not read the book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Not at all. He went to the house of a notorious sinner. Picture this. Harvey Weinstein, Paul Bernardo, Willie Picton, Ted Bundy, and Zacchaeus of the Mongolian tax service. That's right. Altogether, notorious sinners. Everyone hated this guy. He was considered loathsome, deplorable, despicable. We continue on in the story. Meanwhile, Zach stood before the Lord and said, I will give half my wealth to the poor, Lord, and if I have cheated people on their taxes, I will give them back 4 times as much. What's really interesting about what he said is he didn't obey the moral law. He didn't obey the Old Testament at all. In the Old Testament, if you stole from someone, you had to add 20%. It was kind of like a sin tax. If you steal $1 from someone, you pay them back $1.20, for their trouble sort of thing. But Zach didn't pay back 20%. He paid back 400%. This is 20 times what he was supposed to pay. And as an added bonus, the money that he legitimately made, he cut his assets in half and gave them away. See, when God takes over someone's life, the result is not measured, calculated, sensical love. It is extravagant love. So what does Jesus say about this? Jesus responded, Salvation has come to this home today, for this man has shown himself to be a true son of Abraham. It wasn't the giving the money away that made him a son of Abraham. Giving the money away showed that he had become a son of Abraham, that he had already had a change of heart. And this change of heart was so over the top that only true repentance could account for it. The kingdom was expanding. And then Jesus adds these very famous final words. For the Son of Man came to seek and save those who are lost. He says it to all those who were upset that he was at this notorious sinner's house. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save guys like Zach. That's why I'm here. Now, there are 3 stages of proximity that Zach went through, that every follower of Jesus goes through as well. And here they are. I'll just go through them fairly quickly. First of all, Zach started off as part of the crowd. He was simply curious. He just wanted to get a look at Jesus. And today, many people are just curious about Jesus. Jesus is not unique to them. He's sort of an oddity. He's a religious figure, maybe an icon. They might breeze through, the Gospels on occasion or read an article about Jesus, but it's a very casual sort of relationship. Nothing personal. There's no change. And maybe that describes some of you. Maybe you've been going to church. Maybe you've been watching these videos for weeks, months, and you just have a casual relationship with Jesus. You just want to kind of see him, but you don't really expect much else. He's just a curiosity to you, and that's all. And while everyone starts by being part of the crowd, something else happened. Zach went from being part of the crowd to having a conversation. Now this became personal. And every follower of Jesus has this happen. Somewhere along the line, Jesus is no longer just a person of interest. And if you grew up in Sunday school, he's not just a flannel cutout anymore. He becomes someone who's speaking to you. Now, it may not be an audible voice like, Zach experienced here, but you know there's an outside influence. Someone is drawing you closer. You heard something. There's a pull, an invitation, and there's someone awaiting a response from you. Every follower of Jesus senses this. And it's hard to explain. It's hard to put into words, but you just know that Jesus is calling you. Jesus is inviting himself over to your house. And so Zach went from being part of the crowd to having a conversation to collapse. Well, what do you mean collapse? Well, why did Zach take this job? We already talked about it. That's right, money. Money was the most important thing in his life. It was more important than family, than friends, more important than being popular. Money was God to Zach. It was his purpose for living. It created his identity. His whole value in life was around money. And just like we looked at a few weeks ago about how the Ark of the Covenant was placed next to the god Dagon, and Dagon fell before the presence of God, well, in the presence of Christ, this god of money in Zach's life collapsed. His identity about being a rich, successful guy collapsed. His sense of value around being rich collapsed. His purpose in life for collecting more money collapsed. His meaning in life regarding being a tax collector and having all this wealth collapsed. And it all collapsed in one afternoon. He went from being part of the crowd to having a conversation with Jesus to collapse. And this is the story of every Christ follower going from crowd to conversation to collapse. But we're in a series about unity. So what does this story teach us about unity? Quite a bit. Because here's what we see in this story. Jesus sees value where others don't. Jesus saw not a tax collector, not the chief tax collector. Jesus saw Zach, called him by name. Not, hey, you, public enemy number one, but Zach. And isn't it interesting in the stories of Jesus, how Jesus saw value in the sick and the widows and the poor and the foreigner and the criminal. Even the thief on the cross, someone that no one would care about. All he had to do was whisper, and that's probably all that he had the strength for as he slowly suffocated to death. He just said, remember me. He had a conversation with Jesus, and there was a collapse. He went from a defiant, in-charge rebel to being in the presence of Christ. And historically, followers of Jesus have always seen value in others when others didn't. They would see value in the mentally challenged, the slave, the gladiator, the foreigner, unwanted children, the addict, the criminal, the orphan, the sick. And not only that, not only did they see value in these people, they were willing to part with their time and their money in service to those people. And today we carry on seeing value in people, people made in God's image, whether they are born or unborn, whether they are political left or right, whether they are vaxxers or unvaxxers, whether they are criminals or law abiders. Followers of Jesus see people, not behaviors, not titles like chief tax collector, not their appearance, not their history. They see people who are worthy of love. And this gives us unity because we all have a common approach to other people. We see them as valuable. And number two, we see Jesus pursues those that others ignore. People prefer that Jesus would have just passed Zach by, actually. You know, they probably would have made them very happy if Jesus would have just kept on walking. But Jesus loved Zach and pursued him even when it upset people. And get this, it upset the religious people and it upset the irreligious people. Because both of them agreed that tax collector was scum. And here Jesus showed Zach grace. And grace is offensive to people who think they are good. Grace is scandalous to people who think they are good. And so historically, followers of Jesus have pursued others to jails, to hospitals, to jungles, to the farthest reaches of the globe because they see value in them. And today, Jesus is still pursuing people like you, people like me, people like the ones we love all over our city. And he's inviting himself over and wondering if he'll get a welcome. Our mission as a church is inviting people to follow Jesus. I've said this many times, but inviting people to follow Jesus is not specific about who's worthy of an invitation and who's not, because everyone is worthy of that invitation. That's what we learn in this story. Everyone is worthy of an invitation. Even notorious people are worthy of an invitation. This includes the ignored. Jesus went to Zach, and so must we go to them. You know, the people that no one wants as part of their club? You know, the people that no one wants as part of their community or part of their school or part of their family? Those are the perfect people for Nanaimo Alliance Church. That's right. The pursuit of the ignored binds us together because we see a common worth in people, a common value in people, and it gives us a common pursuit of them. So finally, we see that Jesus welcomes those others have condemned. Everyone had written Zach off. He was a hopeless case, a notorious sinner. They already gave him the title. He's a sinner. I'm not a sinner, but he's a sinner. But not Jesus. See, Jesus was filled with hope for Zach. He knew that if Zach could just go from being part of the crowd to having a conversation to having this internal collapse of this god of money, that Zach would become a whole different person. I was listening some time ago to a politician, who I won't name, speaking about a certain group of people and saying there's a special place in hell for people like that. But you know, followers of Jesus would never talk about there being a special place in hell for anyone, because we don't see people in terms of good and bad. We see people as worthy. We see people as worthy of God's love and worthy of God's attention, worthy of Jesus' invitation. That's God's grace. We have this common vision that all the Zachs of the world can be transformed by the love of Christ. And so when you hear a churchgoer talking like that, when you hear a churchgoer using words like worthless or idiot or scum or waste of skin, that is religion. That is dividing people between good and bad, worthy and unworthy. But that's not Christianity. That is not the way of Christ. And when we use terms like that, it shows we do not understand the gospel. We only understand religion, where goodness becomes our God, just like money was Zach's God. Our goodness can sometimes give us our identity, our meaning, our value. But anyone curious about Jesus is welcome to come, is welcome to Jesus. Does that describe you? Are you curious about Jesus? Do you want to have a conversation with Jesus? How long have you been in that tree just wanting a glimpse of Jesus, but not anything really more than that? It's time to hear that voice. It's time to hear that call. That I want to come and I want to live in your house. I want to be in your house, Jesus is saying. Will you have that conversation? Will you experience the collapse? See, we all have a vision as a church of people's potential. Jesus saw Zach's potential. He knew the way that he had designed Zach to be. And followers of Jesus look past behavior. They look past appearances. They look past titles and see people's potential, the value that they have, the people that God designed them to be. And when we have this incredible value on people, we share a common approach to other people. We share a common pursuit of other people. And we share a common vision of what they are going to be when they experience that collapse. You know, C.S. Lewis put it so well. He said, "There are no ordinary people. You have never talked to a mere mortal. Nations, cultures, arts, civilizations. He said, these are mortal, and their life is to ours as the life of a gnat. He said, you want to talk about Canada, you want to talk about things like individualism, our music today, our whole Western society, that is all going to collapse. But, and he concludes with this, it is immortals whom we joke with, work with, marry, snub, and exploit. Jesus saw all people as immortals, and so do his followers. In the book The Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins is given a gift from Thorin Oakenshield. It's a shirt. He gives him a shirt, little parting gift, and it's made of mithril. And when we get to the books from Lord of the Rings, that shirt that Bilbo got is more or less forgotten. It's tucked away. No one talks about it. It's considered unimportant. But Gandalf, the wizard, knew something about that shirt that Bilbo didn't, and no one else clearly knew either. He said, I never told him, but its worth was greater than the value of the whole Shire and everything in it. Everything. That is just like people. For some, they look at someone and they go, it's just a shirt. But to God and to God's people, every person is worth 1,000 Nanaimos. And this binds followers of Jesus together, where we see all people as having infinite worth, the poor, the sick, the political other, all races, foreigners, the not so beautiful, the not so smart, the not so moral. Each person has incredible value, but how can we know that? Because an infinitely valuable person gave his life to save them. To followers of Jesus, there are no worthless people, no wastes of skin, no idiots. But there are a lot of Zacks. People Jesus saw value in, people who will not be ignored, and people who are welcomed. And if done right, if Nanaimo Alliance Church does its job right and we follow Jesus the way he pursued Zach, it's going to upset the religious and the irreligious, because both are going to look at the people in Nanaimo Alliance Church and say those are notorious sinners, and will make them angry. We will be bound together in this. There will be unity as we pursue people that others consider to have little value. But we see value in them because God sees value in them. And we will pursue them even when they're ignored by others. And we will welcome them even though they are condemned by others. We are united around this ultimate value we see in other human beings as measured by the life of the Son of God. And when we value people, we will have a common approach as to how to deal with them. We will pursue them the way Jesus pursued them, and we will have a vision of what they can be, just the way Jesus had a great vision of what Zach could be. What unites us as a church is that when we look around, all we see is people of immeasurable worth who were traded for the life of the grandest king. Let's pray. Lord, I ask that we as a church would see such value in other people that it would unite us, that we would have such a common pursuit of other people that it would unite us, that we'd have such a common vision of what they can become that it would unite us, that there'd be such hope in our midst, that we would work together, that we would sacrifice together to pursue them, to invite them to follow Jesus. Lord, unite the Nanaimo Alliance Church. Unite your church together by seeing others as having infinite value in your eyes. We ask this in the name of our Savior Jesus. Amen. God bless you, everyone. Have a great day.